Today we're going to look at the threats to cardholder data and how they can be effectively mitigated using end-to-end tokenization. We'll talk about some of the benefits of using tokens, things to consider when looking for a tokenization vendor, and we'll look at some of the possible costs associated with tokenization. We'll also review the different types of token solutions on the market today and how effective they really are. We'll review typical transaction processing flows and compare them to various token processing flows. Finally, we'll look at some case studies of how merchants have benefited by using tokens in their processing environments. Today, merchants are increasingly finding themselves between a rock and a hard place, between aggressive hackers and difficult PCI compliance requirements. Obviously, merchants want to protect their data against hackers, and PCI compliance is a great way to help reduce the likelihood of a breach. Unfortunately, breaches in just the past year have potentially compromised hundreds of millions of cardholder data accounts, and the breach threats are both internal as well as external. The external threats are very real and well documented and include organized crime, state-sponsored hackers, activists/terrorists, and again, their activities have resulted in huge amounts of cardholder data being compromised. Internal and business partner threats are also very real and well documented, whether it's from lowered security levels for business partners, malicious activity from rogue employees, or just mistakes from careless or untrained employees. The devastating result is the same: scars on hard-earned reputations, lawsuits, and lost business, all of which have deep bottom-line impacts. You know, it's hard to think of TJ Maxx without first giving some thought to their data breach. PCI compliance has been one way that merchants have been able to better protect themselves against hackers and internal threats. PCI applies to all merchants that process, transmit, or store cardholder data. The PCI data security standards outline the 12 basic requirements as a great starting point for a comprehensive data security plan. Generally, PCI focuses the scope of the audits to those areas of the merchant's network where cardholder data is present. For merchants without cardholder data, such as a merchant with a completely outsourced processing solution, PCI only has 13 questions. Fully in-house processing solutions may require answers to as many as 225 different questions. Unfortunately, the rate of merchant compliance since PCI was adopted by the card networks in 2005 has been very low and very slow. At this point, though, the majority of Tier 1 and Tier 2 merchants are compliant, so the top 1,000 or so merchants are protected to some level against hackers, but millions of mid-size and smaller merchants are still not in compliance. And lately, the PCI DSS itself has come under attack as not being completely effective against hackers, so even those larger merchants may still remain at risk despite being compliant. The Hannaford Brothers supermarket chain breach in December 2007 was certainly the first major challenge to the effectiveness of PCI, as Hannaford claimed they were compliant at the time of the breach. The oft-repeated quote, "compliance doesn't equal security," certainly picked up momentum at that point. So given all the headaches surrounding card number retention and the resultant risk and PCI compliance requirements, why do merchants want to retain the card number? When we've talked to merchants about tokenization, they always give us some reasons why they think they need to keep the card numbers. They need it for reporting, to do historical lookups. They want the ability to perform additional customer service type follow-up transactions like a void or a refund without having to ask the consumer for their card information again. Asking for the last 4 digits of the card number provides a way for customer service to validate who the consumer is. Merchants also like to keep card numbers, especially in card-not-present environments, so they can perform follow-up or remember-me type sales so they don't inconvenience the consumer by asking for the card number again, and it also helps them speed up the checkout process. Chargeback processing practically dictates that you have to keep card numbers because that's what practically the entire processing industry uses to match the chargeback to the original transaction. Tokenization is a generic term that describes the process of replacing the card number with another value with the primary intent of removing card numbers from merchant processing systems and thereby limiting PCI scope. Merchants would then store and transmit tokens rather than card numbers. And when I say card number, we're really talking about account numbers in general or really any data that's tokenized. There's currently no defined standard of what tokenization means or how it's implemented, so we need to look at the various definitions and methods that exist in the marketplace today, which we'll do in a minute. The merchant benefits of tokenization are somewhat clearer, although these benefits will vary by vendor and by implementation. The basic idea here, though, is if you don't have the card numbers, you can't lose them, and obviously you don't need to encrypt them either. So by eliminating the places where the card number is, merchants are able to greatly reduce their financial and reputational risks, both from internal and external threats. If a breach were to occur at a merchant using tokenization, only telephone book information from the transaction could be compromised, not the sensitive card numbers. Certainly the other big factor for merchants deciding to deploy tokenization is how it can help them achieve PCI compliance faster and reduce the costs associated with compliance. Again, PCI audits are generally focused on those areas of the merchant's network where cardholder data is stored, processed, or transmitted. And in version 1.2 of the PCI DSS, depending on the network layout of the merchant, that scope can be greatly expanded. Besides providing greater security, removing card numbers from merchant processing systems can help them with one of the most difficult and expensive sections of the PCI DSS requirements, Requirement 3, which is protecting stored cardholder data. That section outlines all the requirements for encryption and key management. So this in turn reduces the overall cost of the audit, not to mention the ongoing costs and risks of complying with the standard. Now, obviously, the main functionality of tokens allow merchants to perform customer service transactions such as voids and refunds and other back office functions like reconciliation, and in some cases, processing chargebacks using the token instead of the card number. Additional items that a merchant needs to consider regarding tokenization should include the following items. How will your residual processing data be handled? Just because going forward you may have a solution that addresses your PCI compliance concerns, it doesn't mean that the PCI auditors will overlook the card numbers that you have in your systems from your current processing. Without taking care of the existing data too, you really aren't accomplishing the goal of minimizing PCI compliance requirements. What payment channels are supported? Most token vendors only support card present or card not present environments, not both. If your business spans POS, Moto, and e-com, you need a provider that supports all payment channels. What kind of tokens are there and which scheme makes the most sense for your company's security needs, your IT staff, and your customers to use? How complex will the integration be? Will your IT staff be prepared to work with a token instead of the card number? How similar is the work effort to keeping the card numbers and complying with the PCI requirements? What are the upfront integration costs or additional ongoing transaction costs for the token, if any? And are they reasonable and cost-effective in the larger picture? How are chargebacks handled? Are you forced to outsource that function and pay another vendor in order to avoid card numbers? Or can you process them internally with tokens, essentially as you do today? When you look at the processing costs, you have to do so holistically. All of the costs related to processing need to be considered, not just the ones line itemed on your payment processing bill. So this should include the initial and ongoing